afternoon, wherever you are, Black women around the world. Welcome to my channel. And yes, we're going live a little late. Had to work out some technical difficulties from earlier. I'm just waiting for everyone to come online. And if you saw yesterday's short, you'll know what I'm talking about today. And today's topic is hustle culture will not save you if you're a Black woman, part two. Because this conversation has been ongoing back and forth online with various Black women across, the platforms here, whether it's on Instagram, Threads, Facebook. We are all having the same conversations and we're having them live as well. And it all comes back to the same thing, the origins of hustle culture as we know it here, the definition that pertains to us, that is, hustle culture is not going to save you. If you're a Black woman, you already understand contextually because of the history of this country, because of the foundations of this country, what it was built on. Hustle culture is the last thing that will save you if you're a Black woman. That rush to perfection, overextending yourself, giving 150, 200% in your career, getting all those extra degrees, Black excellence. These were all strategies and ways we had of navigating systems of oppression within the environment that we live in, namely the US of A. This country was built on the brutality, the blood, sweat, and tears of people who look like me, of our ancestors who were in the most inhumane, brutal, and horrific conditions. African people were brought to this continent to serve as labor, chattel, and everything in between. So when you consider things like hustle culture, because that's a big thing now. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tonia Barango. I am a women's self-care and health coach for Black women, and I help liberate Black women and elevate Black women through decolonized self-care so that you can divest from burnout, people pleasing, and get off the altar of other people's expectations. Now, let's wrap it back up to today's topic, hustle culture and why it won't save you as a Black woman. Audre Lorde, most of us are familiar with the writings of Audre Lorde, an activist, a writer, an academician, all of those things. And she spoke of self-care at nauseum. She spoke of it extensively, and she talked about how we as Black women are in a special category because we have so many points of intersection. We have to deal with navigating discrimination, systemic racism, but we also have to navigate patriarchy, and not just patriarchy white version. We have to navigate Black patriarchy. We have to navigate not just misogyny, but misogynoir. And so we have all these extra stressors on us, and we have built over time. Historically, we've tried to find ways to mitigate, to balance that pressure on us to survive, to thrive, even in the most dire of circumstances. Ladies, this is 2025. We're not doing that anymore. We're not doing that anymore. We are not just resting, but we are breaking cycles of maladaptive strategies that we've been using in the past that may have served our ancestors and predecessors before us. They might have served them in the short term. And yes, a lot of those strategies helped us. But the definition of crazy is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. You cannot use the tools of the master to dismantle the master's house. We see that playing out in 4K all around us. For those of us who live in the US of A, we see this playing out in 4K. All of the progress that we've struggled for, that we've bled for, that our ancestors have struggled for, bled for, and suffered all kinds of brutality, we see all of this progress being rolled back, all of these draconian laws and actual dismantling of a number of things that we benefited from for so long, that we had achieved, that we've worked hard to achieve. Now, hustle culture, I hate to break it to you, is part of that whole system. It's built on exploitation and really unsustainable practices. There's no room for balance. There's no room for alignment. There's no room for connection. There's no room for humanity. It's very individualistic, which is typical of American exceptionalism, which again is another child of white supremacy. And you could go on and on and on and into the woods about that, over the trees, through the woods, however you want to describe that. Bottom line, hustle culture leads to burnout and poor health outcomes. And when you add the context of being a black woman or a black person existing in a black body in an environment that is inherently violent and oppressive to you from the get-go, adding the layers of hustle culture is only going to get you further down the road of destruction. So I work in healthcare. I work on the laboratory, and if you watched my short from the other day, I talked about how colleagues, myself and other colleagues in the laboratory, we've all had this discussion, especially Black women and people of color in the laboratory, and we're talking about what we see coming down the line in terms of health implications and access to health care for people of color and other marginalized people, and what that will look like. Well, if you're operating from hustle culture, trying to make ends meet, if you think that hustle culture is going to keep you going, I got another thing for you. The only thing it's going to lead you to is death and destruction, your death. I hate to be graphic here, but I've seen so many patient results. All of us talk about this. The data that's come out in terms of health disparities, particularly as it applies to Black women, Black people, POC communities, and the numbers are not looking good at all. We're seeing a number of reversals and progress that were strides that were made in terms of improving health outcomes for us. But now with these rollbacks, these cuts to things like essential services that were put in place and were cobbled together through the ACA, or otherwise known as Obamacare, all of that is being dismantled. So what does that mean? Historically, we know that the most vulnerable populations will always be, as long as we continue to have this crazy experiment of racism and discrimination that is this country, as long as that continues, and with the dismantling of essential healthcare services and all of that, the most vulnerable populations will always be the ones that are impacted the most. We've already seen horrific data coming out about maternal health outcomes, fetal and maternal health outcomes for Black women. The mortality rate for Black women and Black infants has doubled, arguably tripled in some instances, depending on what data sets you're looking at. And so we have to Let that go. Hustle culture is a scam. It is the surefire way to get you to to an early grave. And I've spoken about all of these various forms of archetypes that we've embodied as Black women to navigate discrimination and misogyny and patriarchy, and how that is another those are other maladaptive strategies that don't work for us anymore. And so that's why there's so many of us needing mental health who have been traumatized, who need mental health practitioners, who need, more medication or what have you, who are experiencing things like high cholesterol, diabetes, mental health issues, depression, overwhelm, burnout, hair loss, weight gain, hormonal imbalance. All of these are indicators of existing in a toxic environment that has so much pressure on you from so many different avenues. And so we have, you know, for lack of a better word, we use our ancestors and our predecessors used the tools they had at the time. So when you know better, you do better. And so at the time, things like hustle culture, Black excellence were all avenues to obtaining mobility, moving forward, improving quality of life. Education has always been huge in our communities because those have been the pathways for getting economic development, for making things easier, better quality of life, better opportunities, and ultimately better health outcomes. However, given what has happened in the country nationwide, what continues to happen post elections, we can see that whatever strategies we were using, these old strategies and, arguably, you know, oh, effective strategies in the short term that we were using, those are no longer viable. Those are actually killing us now. And we see this even in the natural world, hence evolution. That when you are in an environmental pressures ultimately determine what strategies, what adaptations are necessary in order to what? In order to thrive and to survive and perpetuate into the next generation. We're in a time now where we are seeing, we have hard evidence that hustle culture is not going to save you. And if you are a woman, it's going to be worse. And if you're a Black woman, it's going to be exceptionally bad for you. Uh, the healthcare, the numbers are out. It doesn't matter what socioeconomic class you come from. It doesn't matter whether you're Beyonce or whether you're the um, the teacher in the classroom or the customer service rep on the phone. Bottom line, these things, these children of racism and white supremacy, aka hustle culture, they they don't do anything for us. They don't do anything good for us. And so in order to evolve and move to the next level for us in terms of our health and well-being, we as Black women have got to divest from that. Because the one thing that it has in common with the system that we're already dealing with in this country, systemic oppression, discrimination, et cetera, et cetera, is that hustle culture is extremely exploitative and extractive. And it's very much disconnected from the environment and completely ignores the needs of the individual and the community from which that individual comes from. And so it has a tendency to not just isolate, but um, it creates an environment that's so toxic and so closed that you end up literally suffocating in that bubble called hustle culture. One, the goalpost, we already know, we see that every time with the big, beautiful bill as well, with caps on student loans and things of that nature. Why are you connecting the dots as to why those things were certain, things were put into that bill regarding education, regarding healthcare? What communities are most impacted by that? We already know that the data's out. I don't need to go dig anything out. I don't need to bring any papers or proof other than what's out there. The data's already been done by the best of researchers. Black women are the most educated demographic in this country. We have many of us have multiple degrees. Why? Because we understand historically, generationally, because of the environment that the society that we live in, we've always had to be two, three, four, five times better than our um, colleagues who are white females or white males. We always have to overcompensate. Hustle culture is that on steroids, and it's killing us. So many, I've talked to colleagues who have come to me because they understand too that I'm a women's self-care and health coach that's just for Black women. A number of them are POC and Black women, and they just came to me periodically to bounce ideas off, to vent, if you will, and look for solutions. And I tell them the same thing. I said, you know what? All of that hustling you're doing for your employer, all of that giving 150% overtime, all doing overtime, doing all the things, that means absolutely nothing to the system. All it's going to do is isolate you from your family, disconnect you from community and your body and yourself. And you just become a machine that breaks down, and a machine that will break down very quickly because no organism can sustain a constant state of agitation without the body systems, the organ systems failing. Our bodies, and it's not just we as humans, most organisms on this planet have a rest cycle, have a nurture cycle, have a cycle of reprocessing and recalibration. Hustle culture does not allow you to do that. You completely bypass all of the natural cycles for recovery, for rest, for regeneration. You completely bypass that consistently over and over and over again. What do you think is going to happen? And so you wonder why you're burnt out, you're feeling stressed, you're feeling out of alignment. And as you age, for women, and it's not just women, as we age, period, because it's not just we as women who have hormonal fluctuations, men do too. But I'm speaking specifically to Black women and women in particular. Stress has a profound effect on our biological systems, and that has to do with the uniqueness of our physiology as women. Now, add on the epigenetics of being Black, existing in a Black body here in the diaspora, the trauma that has, in a lot of instances, yet to be addressed. Let's not even get into the reparations, the economic redress that is due. And I don't see that happening in my lifetime, at least. Um, all of these things, they just compound and compound and compound and compound. And you wrap hustle culture around that, there's no way that you're going to be okay. And there's no way that you can thrive in that. It's possible to exist in a state of hustle, if you will, for a short time, but none of that is sustainable. It's just like the, fight or flight hormone kick that happens when you're in a situation where you're feeling threatened or a heightened, awareness, sense of awareness is required. We see this in the animal kingdom all the time, and even animal studies have been done where animals have been put in a constant state of stress. Um, there have been some lab rat studies and some other animal studies that support that. So imagine you as a Black woman existing in a Black body, the damage that you're consistently inflicting upon yourself and your body operating in hustle culture. Because again, hustle culture is not anything good for you. It is any system that is built on oppression, that is tied to racism, capitalism, exploitation. That's not good for any human body over the long term. And it's particularly harmful to us as Black people because we have so much generational and historic trauma that we have undergone that has not been alleviated and that we are still working through. We're just in the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years that the real work has been done in terms of shedding light on the impact of the constant barrage of state sanctioned violence, discrimination, oppression that we live under l- existing while Black. The constant policing of it really takes a toll. And unless you exist in a Black body and unless you are a Black woman, you're not going to understand the full ramifications of that. And that's why more and more of us are stepping into the health and wellness space because we've got to do something about this before it gets even further out of hand. And so, what can you do? So, the question then becomes because I know I've had that question asked, as well. So, Tonya, what do we do? How do we, first things first? Um, the first step is recognizing that you're in a trap and that you are on the plantation 2.0 and it's time to get out. And the pathway to that is decolonized self-care. Decolonized self-care centers your historic, your cultural context, it reclaims your traditional connections. It connects to community, all of the practices and contexts that we as a people have carried with us, the remnants of cultural heritage and knowledge that we brought over with us, during that whole chattel slavery, uh, brutality, and trauma. During that time, we still managed to retain certain practices and knowledge bases that we need to now reclaim and reintegrate and decouple from exploitative systems that are around us. And that takes, that takes work. But again, as my own therapist has told me, you've got to be, in order to heal, in order to reclaim, in order to be aligned and in sync and fully whole and liberated mentally, physically, and spiritually, you've got to go through that journey. And decolonize self care, that's what it is. It is not the capitalistic, Instagram colonial version of self care that, or, stuff, hodgepodge of stuff that's being marketed to the general public as self care. That I've spoken of, on that at length, that version of what they're calling self-care out there, it wasn't built for us anyway. It wasn't built for Black people and it wasn't built for people of color. That is a hodgepodge of stolen traditions that have been stripped of context, history, knowledge, and it's been repackaged and rebundled at a price to you for you. That's not for us. And that's why people, a lot of Black women, are you are finally, that light bulb is finally going off and saying, oh, so that's why it's not working. And more and more are being drawn to spaces and communities that are sister circles, that are contextually relevant and culturally relevant to us as a people, and that's specific to Black women in the diaspora as well as on the continent. So noisy neighbor. But anyway, sorry about that little interruption. I don't know if you heard that noise, but anywho, that is that is the story of the day, if you will. We've had a lot going on in terms of celebrations. Last month, it was Juneteenth. I took that time to reconnect and just have a lot of tap into Black joy. Um, there was this, other holiday that really isn't relevant to us as Black people because I know what my ancestors were doing on that particular day, so that ain't got nothing to do with me. So I had ancestors both here and on the continent, and none of them had anything to do with that. So yeah. But aside from that, bringing it all back, decolonized self-care is foundational to your healing journey and your reclamation process. If you want to be liberated and whole, and free from burnout, the soul deep stress. You want to get off the altar of other people's expectations because, again, all of these kind of things that tear down boundaries, that erode boundaries, a lot of them are rooted in trauma, and specifically in a number of instances, like when I'm speaking of things like hustle culture and toxicity in the workplace, that's rooted in white supremacy. If you go through the channel, there are on the playlist, I have a number of discussions where I talk about archetypes related to that. When I talk about more deeply about the connection between um, boundaries, uh, radical self care, decolonized self care, why it is unique and specific to us as a people, because what? Our existence historically, our ties and context with this part of the world has always been political. We have so many points of intersectionality that we can't do anything else. We can't access things that are not built for us because we occupy a unique space in time, and our experiences are very unique and specific, and in order to reclaim, to heal, to mitigate the effects of trauma. There is a Black researcher, I don't have her name off the top of my head, who spoke of post slavery, PTSD associated with that. We have other researchers who've spoken on the epigenetics of the trauma associated with enslavement and ongoing discrimination and institutionalized racism. All of that has to be addressed, and it's in order to fully delve into it and to fully heal and begin that reclamation process, that self-liberating reclamation process for you as a woman, a Black woman, and you as a Black person specifically, you have to have decolonized self-care as your foundation, because once you start doing the work associated with that, you start reclaiming all those broken pieces and you start reintegrating. So I, again, as I said before in other videos, I never go into specifics in terms of the rituals and the traditional ways of healing, modalities of healing that are um, unique to Black people. of the diaspora and of the continent. I never go into that, and I will never go into that specifics of that on an open platform because, again, that is stuff that needs to be gate kept because, as you see with the version of self care that's out here, that's been colonized and stolen from other indigenous and people around from the global majority and repackaged. None of that is respected. All of that is decontextualized, and a lot of the power that is behind that has been lost because it's been stripped from its original creators. And so that's a whole nother discussion. So I just wanted to speak on that hustle culture because that's a thing it seems to be a hot topic right now, where everybody's talking about hustle culture. I know it was big um, around this time last year or two, where people were talking about, oh, you gotta hustle, make that. No, it sounds uncomfortably like pimping. But again, that too is exploitation. So, once you start doing the work of decolonized self care, you start tuning in and those flags, you gain the awareness and the ability to see past the trappings of the uh, of the abuser, if you will, of the oppressor, of the systems that are in place to extract your labor and your life force from you. It becomes easier and easier to clock it. And so the more you do the work, and that's why I always encourage even I encourage friends, I encourage families, I encourage coworkers, um, especially if you're a Black woman, especially if you're a person of color, because we have to navigate these systems. And if you're going to heal, you've got to do the work. Now, I've also had the other conversation as well that there comes a point when you're just like when you're working out and you push your body, especially things like in strength training and so on and so forth, where you hit a plateau and you have to do something different to get to the next level. Well, the same thing applies, and this is where the discussions are being had in our communities now. At what point do you say you're going to need to remove yourself from a toxic environment in order to continue your healing journey? And that's where I come in and say, that's where travel or moving abroad or moving to another location becomes a topic of discussion and it becomes something that's a real consideration. I have been open and honest with saying that I know and understand in my very being that at some point I will exit the United States because I don't feel like you can fully heal in a place that is causing trauma and harm on a consistent basis. Decolonized self care is a powerful modality to help, buffer you and protect you and even help you move to the next level. But at some point, you're going to need to make that decision. And that is something for individuals to navigate themselves because everybody knows what their own situation is. But that's a topic for another day, and that's another conversation. But feel free to hit the subscribe button, notification, like button, share this video with someone, the replay it with someone else, another Black woman, if you feel it's helpful and if you feel it's been informative. But I'm going to wrap it up here because I want to give other people, I want to give you time to marinate on this. I typically advise others to take time to especially if you have the weekend off. I know those of us who are in healthcare, we typically work some weekends, and then we have other weekends off. But regardless, I always say self-care, decolonized self-care will save your life. Reconnect with your ancestors, reconnect with family and community and in safety. And that's another important aspect of decolonized self-care is the sense and creation of safety, of a safe space. I've always given the example, or rather, several times I've given the example of being the only Black person in a room dealing with microaggressions and all of that uh, passive aggressive racism, if you will. Racism that's, put in nice terms. Oh, professional. Oh, you speak well. Oh, all these kind of racist um, speak that's been coded in a way that it's not, it's deemed not, inappropriate or what have you, or rather very difficult to uh, fully articulate its harmful effects. You cannot, if you are in a space where you're going for exercise, you're going for healing, you're going to decompress, safety, because of our history as Black women and as Black people in this country, by default, we must have safety in a space where we're recovering, where we are nurturing, where we are doing anything self care related. And so I want to leave you with that thought. Ask yourself if you're going to a place that you feel safe, unmasking, and regenerating. If you can't say that about the space you're going to, you don't need to be there. Having said that, have a awesome weekend and tune in to next week's topic. I haven't put it out yet, but be sure to follow and subscribe so that you know when I go live again, put another video out or another short. So till next time, thank you for tuning in. Bye.